Okay, so with that said, here is your only responsibility as long as you seem to be in a body within the world. You know, it's interesting because A Course in Miracles tells us that our only responsibility is to accept the atonement for ourselves. You don't know how many times people have said to me, I have no idea what that means. There's something about that word atonement that is so slippery, people cannot seem to grab a hold of it and understand it. So I think we're going to hear the same teaching using different thoughts. And let's see if this is helpful to some people. With that said, here is your only responsibility as long as you seem to be in a body within a world. Your influence on the total, okay, all of us, your influence on the total comes from your interpretation of the code, which you then relive as individual interpreted code, or you choose not to relive through recognition of your creative ability. At some level, you must recognize your power to change the code, or you remain trapped within the belief and acceptance of the code as real. The only way to be released from the code as you write it is to recognize your freedom and choose to write different code. Now, how do we write different code? Spirit's going to talk about this, but we actually write different code by choosing not to believe the current code. That's it. By choosing not to believe the current code, by choosing not to judge the current code, by choosing not to take the current code so seriously, by choosing to remember it's just code, it's just illusion, that rewrites the next code. That's all you got to do. You can't help it. Think about it. You dropped a brick on your foot, you had a reaction. What can you do about that? You can't do anything about that except now choose how you're going to perceive what you just thought, felt, did. And you're either going to believe it fully and go completely into that script and experience everything that script is giving you to experience, or you're not. It's your only choice, is your choice in perception. And whatever you choose to perceive goes back into the great author of the world, which is all of us together, goes back into the great author of the world and writes the upcoming minutes. And you know, even with our limited human minds, it's not hard to see that if I walk into a room and I see, underwear everywhere, and a thought comes into my mind telling me to hate Laurent, and I absolutely choose to hate him, that I'm going to have an experience of hate, right? Or if I walk into the room and I see underwear everywhere and a thought comes into my mind to hate Laurent, and then I choose to say, this is just code that's trying to give me an experience of hate. Can you feel that I'm now going to have a different experience? The thought itself was not different. What I'm seeing in form is not different. But my experience is going to be different because of my chosen perception. That's what this is telling us. My experience is going to be different. That different experience is what Spirit is calling rewriting the code. Because instead of a hate experience, I'm going into a different experience. It's a forgiveness experience, using the language of the Course. It's a releasing experience. It's an awakening experience. So with that said, here is your only responsibility. Your only responsibility. Can I answer Adele's question? Hold on. I don't usually see questions well when I'm teaching, so let me see if I can find Adele's question. So we can choose to rewrite the script. Rewriting the script is choosing your perception. That's what I was just talking about. You don't choose to rewrite the script like by changing Laurent. You don't say, okay, I'm going to choose with the power of my mind to change Laurent so that he starts putting his underwear away. That's not what we mean by rewrite the script. We're talking about your individual responsibility, your individual experience. We're talking about you. If you fully believe the thoughts and the experience, you're going to go right into whatever it's trying to give you, whether it's an experience of hate, an experience of fear, an experience of guilt. You're going to go all the way into it. Right. The brick's already dropped. The brick has already dropped. You've already walked into the bedroom and there's underwear everywhere. That's past. It's already past. You're not going to go back and change the past. That's impossible. It may have happened a split second ago, but it's still past. You're not changing the past when we rewrite the script. You're changing the reaction, the direction you're going. Are you changing the next brick? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. We're talking about changing your experience. You can have a really awful experience when you drop a brick on your toe, or you can not have a really awful experience when you drop a brick on your toe. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about changing your experience. And yes, anyone who has done this knows that as you change your experience, also a lot of things in form change too, but that's not what we're trying to control here. And we can't control it. If you think about this for half a moment, you can't control it because you're not an individual writing the world. We write the world as a totality. You're only one of billions of authors if we look at it from our point of view. So you affect what is being written, but you cannot control what is being written. All right? Let's see. How do we not fall into denial about our feelings? Just trust my perception is wrong? I'll answer this question, then I'm going to go back, because I feel like if I answer too many questions, I'll start to move away from the code, and I want to stick with it. But I will tell you how I fell and how I did not fall into denial. I literally had a practice where I would say, consciously in my mind, I see that thought. You know, I would see the thought, for example, to really hate Laurent. And I would say, I see that thought. I feel this emotion. But this is just code, right? And then I'm not denying it. Okay, so let me go back to the message then. Again, with that said, here is your only responsibility as long as you seem to be in a body within a world. Your influence on the total comes from your interpretation of the code, which you then relive as individual interpreted code, or you choose not to relive through recognition of your creative ability. At some level, you must recognize your power to change the code. And again, this is by choosing your perception. Or you remain trapped within the belief and acceptance of the code as real. You believe every single thought that comes into your mind and you don't question any of them. You believe every single experience you have and you don't question any of them. That's how you remain trapped. The only way to be released from the code as you write it is to recognize your freedom and choose to write different code. Again, you have the freedom to choose your perception. In its most basic element, individual interpreted code comes into the mind as a thought, feeling, or reaction to the overall illusory code. It is part of the total, but it is a part that makes the total, so it is as significant as the overall code. So what he's saying, he's telling us now how we are creator and how we write the code. And he's really telling us, again, it's all of us together. You know, if all of us together witness an event, we all have coded reactions that come into our minds. And if we fully believe those coded reactions, we're going to continue to write that event in a certain way. If it's a fearful event, we're just going to continue to write fear, for example. But if we're all pretty dang enlightened, okay, we're all pretty dang enlightened, and a, quote, fearful event happens, and we all choose to look at it. We have 6 billion eyes watching it on TV, right? And we all choose to look at it. And we all choose to remember this is only code. This is not real, and we don't go into fear. The actual events as they could have played out will play out differently because we are all joined in that new perception. This is what Jesus meant when he said, with just a little bit of faith you could move mountains. The thing that's key here is in order to move the mountains, we really need at least a majority, right? We really need a lot of us choosing not to believe the code. So if there's only a couple of people not believing the code, it may change a little, but it might not change significantly. However, the ones that are not believing the code are still going to have a different experience and understanding of what's happening. So an individual in a mass situation does not necessarily change the code. However, an individual in a smaller situation many times has changed the code. We have many stories of Peace Pilgrim. We have stories of Jesus. I've had my own experiences where there's a smaller amount of what we'll call witnesses, right? And when I or Jesus or Peace Pilgrim or someone else like that chooses a specific perception, the entire event begins to unfold differently. Like Peace Pilgrim has that one amazing story about, she has that one amazing story about when this man showed up and was going to beat this little girl, right? And she went out there and she chose to look at the man, and she didn't say anything, but she chose to just love him, to realize his truth for him. And he chose to drop his planned attack and to walk away. And then she says, after she tells that story, she says, what do you think would have happened if I had gone out with the tooth and claw, laws of the jungle? What if I'd gone out there fearful, fighting him? Why, he would have beat me up too, right? So she's acknowledging that because she chose a perception of an event, that the code in that little event changed. So this is why I say the form of the event will sometimes change and the form of the event will sometimes not change, because it's not an individual writing the event. It's a shared event. But the experience of the individual that's choosing a more enlightened perception will always change. It has to. And our perception is not at all victim to the code. Our perception is not at all victim to what seems to be happening in form. So even if what happens in form continues, our experience, our perception, our way of being with that event can change. And again, it may change the event itself.